Ambition can be a powerful driving force. And when you couple that with rivalry, well, the stage is often set for some pretty high drama and sometimes spectacular falls.
Absolutely.
Today, we're diving deep into a story just brimming with those elements. It's a fascinating and maybe cautionary tale from Buddhist teachings, the life of Devadatta.
Right. In our exploration today, it draws from sources that really meticulously recount Devadatta's path. We're talking from his initial entry into monastic life, right through to his, well, ultimately very dramatic end.
So we'll be tracing his journey, looking at his choices, and trying to understand their pretty far-reaching consequences.
Exactly. And this isn't just, some abstract philosophical thing.
No.
It's grounded in a real historical context.
Right.
Ancient India, the time of the Buddha, that's the setting for this very human drama.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Where does Devadatta's story actually kick off?
Well, it starts amid this huge wave of ordinations. We're talking 80,000 relatives, a massive number deciding to become monastics.
80,000, wow.
Yeah. But interestingly, the texts point out that 6 specific Sakyan nobles, Padilla, Anuruddha, Ananda, Bhagu, Kimbala, and Devadatta himself, they weren't initially part of that group. And this actually prompted their other relatives to encourage their own sons to ordain, almost implying these 6 weren't seen as the closest kin, or maybe just less inclined initially.
That's interesting. So even within this big family structure, there was this strong push, almost an expectation towards renunciation. It definitely sets a certain stage.
It really does.
And speaking of unique upbringings, the story of Anuruddha in that group is pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, Anuruddha was raised in such extreme luxury, apparently he'd never even heard the word no.
Never heard no?
Never. The sources use this great anecdote about a dice game to illustrate it. He kept losing because he ran out of cakes, right? So he just sends for more, completely unaware that supplies could actually run out.
It really highlights how a life without any hardship can create such a skewed view of reality, a stark contrast to the path he's heading towards.
Exactly. That difference in just fundamental understanding, it probably plays a role later in how they approach spiritual development.
And his mother's way of saying, "we're out of cakes," was just so elaborate, sending back an empty golden dish covered by another golden dish.
Incredible, isn't it? Such an indirect way to signal lack to someone who's literally never experienced it.
But then it gets even stranger.
Yeah, this is where the city-protecting deities step in. Apparently, remembering Anuruddha's generosity in a past life giving food to a Pacheka Buddha, that's a solitary enlightened being.
Ah, right.
They ensured he wouldn't experience nothing. They just miraculously filled that empty dish with divine cakes.
Divine cakes. That's quite an upgrade from the usual snacks. The texts say, the scent filled the city, the taste was sensational.
It really underscores the significance they placed on his past good deeds, his karma.
Yeah.
And here's the funny part. Anuruddha, having never heard no, just assumed no cake, was another type of cake when his mother sent the empty dish. So he specifically asked for no cake.
Oh, that's brilliant. And even when he asked for no cake, these divine ones kept showing up.
They kept appearing right up until he renounced household life. It just hammers home how incredibly sheltered he was.
But this naivety wasn't just about food, was it? He seemed pretty clueless about monastic life, too.
Very much so. When his brother Mahanama suggested he either ordain or, learn a trade, basically saying renunciation is expected in this family.
Right.
Anuruddha started questioning what it even involved. He was worried about the austerity, the shaved head, simple robes, sleeping rough, begging for food.
And then there's that quite funny exchange about where food actually comes from. He had no idea.
None at all. He's talking with Kimbala and Padilla. Kimbala, who'd seen grain brought in, thought food came from the storehouse.
Okay.
Padilla, who'd seen cooking, figured it came from the pot.
Makes sense.
But Anuruddha, you'd only ever seen food served in golden dishes. So naturally, he assumed that's where food originates.
Wow. Just totally disconnected from basic life processes.
Complete.
But eventually, he does decide to ordain. What finally pushes him?
It seems to be a mix of things. The constant encouragement from relatives, for one. But the real decider was his mother's condition.
Ah, the condition.
Yeah, she finally agreed, but only if his good friend Padilla ordained too, which meant Anuruddha then had to persuade Padilla.
And this is where Devadatta comes back into the picture properly. He joins this group.
Yes, exactly. Devadatta joins Padilla, Anuruddha, Ananda, Bhagu, and Kimbala And they're also joined by their barber, Upali, so a group of 7.
7 of them. And they had, what, a final week of luxury before leaving?
That's right. 7 days of indulgence, like a last hurrah before setting off with a 4-fold army accompanying them initially.
Which they sent back at the border. And they gave all their expensive ornaments to Upali. That's a big gesture.
Huge, a real symbol of leaving that old life behind. The texts even say the forest and the earth reacted, signifying it was a major event.
But poor Upali, suddenly holding all this wealth, he must have been worried.
Definitely. He was in a tough spot, fearing the Sakyans would blame him for the prince's leaving, maybe even think he stole the jewels.
So what did he do? That's a real dilemma.
He decided to renounce too. He saw the princes giving up so much, realized the depth of their commitment, and thought, what's this wealth compared to that? So he hung the ornaments on a tree, said anyone could take them, and went after the nobles to find the Buddha.
Wow. And when they all finally reached the Buddha, they did something quite remarkable related to Upali.
They did. A real act of humility. Despite being high-born nobles, they specifically asked for Upali, the former barber, to be ordained first,
Why first?
to consciously break down their own pride, their pride of caste, their social standing. It was about entering the monastic community on an equal footing.
That really speaks volumes about the principles of the early Sangha, the community. So what happened to these 7 after they ordained? Did they all flourish?
Well, 5 of them made incredible spiritual progress. Badia apparently attained the 3 knowledges, knowing past lives, seeing rebirths, knowing how suffering ends really quickly within that first rainy season retreat.
Impressive.
Anuruddha gained divine vision, like clairvoyance, and later became an arahant, fully enlightened. Ananda reached stream entry, which is a major milestone, guaranteeing future enlightenment, and Vagu and Kimbala also eventually became arahants.
So a lot of success there. What about Devadatta? How did his path compare?
Yeah, here's the contrast. Devadatta only attained mundane psychic powers,
Mundane, meaning?
meaning things like levitation, maybe telekinesis, that sort of thing. Powers, yes, but not the deep wisdom or liberation the others achieved. They don't automatically mean spiritual progress in the Buddhist sense.
Ah, okay, so it's a different kind of attainment.
Very different kind. And this difference in the quality of their progress, not just the presence of powers, is really a crucial early sign. It shows their paths were already starting to diverge quite significantly.
Okay, so we see this shared start, but then this clear split in their development. This seems to set the stage for, well, the seeds of discord, as you put it. What really sparked Devadatta's ambition and that rivalry?
The story shifts to Kosambi. The Buddha and his main disciples, they're getting a lot of respect, lots of offerings from people.
Right.
And Devadatta notices this. He sees people flocking to the Buddha, seeking out the 80 great disciples, but not him. Even though he's also a Sakyan, also renounced his old life.
Yeah, I can see how that might sting. Like being overlooked despite having the same background, it could easily breed resentment, feeling undervalued.
Exactly. And that's when he starts thinking, how can I get that kind of fame, those kinds of offerings?
Ah, so the focus shifts.
Completely. It moves away from genuine spiritual practice towards seeking personal recognition and gain, and his strategy. He decides to target Prince Ajatasattu.
Ajatasattu, why him specifically?
Well, Devadatta was quite calculating here. He saw that Prince Ajatasattu didn't have the same spiritual depth or discernment as his father, King Bimbisara. The king was already a stream enterer, quite advanced spiritually.
I see. So the prince was seen as more impressionable.
Precisely. Easier to influence, less grounded in the Dharma. Devadatta saw an opportunity.
A calculated move, then.
Yeah.
And how did he actually win the prince over? It wasn't exactly subtle, was it?
Not at all. He put on a real show using those mundane psychic powers he'd developed. He transformed himself into a child, but like draped in snakes.
Snakes. And...
Descended dramatically from the sky and landed right in Ajatasattu's lap.
Whoa. That would definitely get your attention.
If you'd think so. And after that initial shock value, he revealed who he was and performed some more, let's say, conventional miracles. It worked. The prince was deeply impressed.
So Ajatasattu starts supporting him, giving him resources, status.
Yes. And all this support, all this attention, it just fueled Devadatta's arrogance. It grew and grew until he felt bold enough to approach the Buddha himself with a truly audacious request.
Okay, what did he ask for? It must have been pretty extreme, given the Buddha's reaction.
He went to the Buddha and basically said, look, you're getting old. It's time for you to retire from leading the Sangha.
Wow.
And then he proposed himself as the new leader. A direct challenge to the Buddha's authority, pure ambition.
And the Buddha's response was, not encouraging, I take it.
Not remotely. The Buddha flat out rejected him. He used a really strong comparison, like someone wanting to consume spittle, just completely dismissive and, frankly, quite insulting.
Ouch. That's blunt.
Very. And that strong public rebuke, it immediately ignited this deep resentment in Devadatta. He just stormed off, furious. Does that level of directness from the Buddha seem unusual? Or does it just highlight how bad this request was?
It definitely underscores the seriousness. Trying to usurp the Buddha's position was a major transgression. And the Buddha didn't just leave it there, did he? He let people know what Devadatta had tried to do.
No, he made a public announcement in Rajagaha, told everyone about Devadatta's ambition, his attempt to take over. This public exposure probably just added fuel to Devadatta's fire.
So his grab for power failed, and everyone knew about it. This seems to be where things take a much darker turn. What was his next move? Because it was way more drastic.
Oh, much darker. His resentment festered, and his next step was truly treacherous. He went back to Prince Ajatasattu,
Uh-oh.
and he pitched this horrifying plan, patricide and regicide. He told the prince, "You kill your father, King Bimbisara, and take the throne."
Good heavens.
And then Devadatta essentially said, "I'll kill the Buddha, and I'll become the new Buddha, the new spiritual leader." It's just a complete abandonment of morality.
That's shocking. A plot to kill both the king and the Buddha. Did Ajatasattu actually go through with killing his father? And obviously Devadatta didn't succeed with the Buddha.
Sadly, yes, Ajatasattu did commit patricide, a terrible act with huge negative karmic consequences. But Devadatta's attempts on the Buddha's life, thankfully, all failed.
How did they fail? What did he try first?
First, he tried hiring assassins. But when these assassins actually approached the Buddha, they were apparently so overcome by his presence, his calm, his teaching.
They couldn't do it.
They couldn't. They dropped their weapons, converted on the spot, and took refuge with the Buddha instead.
Wow. His own hired killers turned disciples. The irony. But Devadatta didn't stop there, did he?
No, he was relentless. His next attempt was more direct, more personal. He climbed Vulture Peak, a place strongly associated with the Buddha.
Right.
And he hurled a massive rock down towards where the Buddha was below.
Did it hit him?
It didn't kill him. Apparently, the rock splintered, and only a small fragment hit the Buddha's foot, causing a minor injury. Enough to draw blood, but not the fatal blow Devadatta intended.
Still determined, though. He tried again, using an animal this time. The Nalagiri elephant story is pretty famous.
Extremely dramatic. Yes, he arranged for Nalagiri, this notoriously fierce elephant, to be let loose and driven towards the Buddha as he was walking for alms in Rajagaha. The idea was just to have it trample him.
Terrifying. But Ananda, the Buddha's loyal attendant, stepped in, didn't he? An incredible act of bravery.
Absolutely selfless. Ananda saw the danger, saw the elephant charging, and just put himself right in its path. Stood between the raging elephant and the Buddha, ready to sacrifice himself.
What does that moment tell us about, the devotion people felt?
It shows an incredible depth of loyalty and courage, a complete willingness to protect the teacher. But ultimately, Ananda didn't need to be trampled.
Because the Buddha himself handled it.
Yes. The text described the Buddha radiating immense loving-kindness, this powerful spiritual energy. It completely calmed Nalagiri. The enraged elephant just bowed down peacefully.
Amazing. And after this incredible event, the Buddha taught the crowd that had gathered.
He did. A huge crowd witnessed this, and he used the opportunity to teach the Dharma. Many people were profoundly moved and converted right then and there.
So Devadatta's plan backfired spectacularly again. And this time, his evil intent was really undeniable, wasn't it? Even more than the assassins or the rock.
Oh, absolutely. The Nalagiri incident made it crystal clear to everyone just how malicious Devadatta had become. The public outcry against King Ajatasattu, who is still known to be supporting Devadatta at this point, became intense.
People were angry at the king for associating with him.
Very angry. This public pressure finally forced the king's hand.
So Ajatasattu finally cut ties. What were the consequences for Devadatta?
Yes, the king withdrew all his support. No more patronage, no more resources, and maybe even worse for a monk. The ordinary citizens of Rajagaha, disgusted by his actions, refused to give him alms food.
Wow, completely shunned. No support from the top, no support from the people. That must have hit him hard. How did he try to claw back some influence after that?
Well, facing this total loss of status and support, he shifted tactics again. He tried to win followers through, let's say, cunning rather than genuine practice. He went back to the Buddha again, but this time with what looked like a very pious request.
Okay, what was this new angle? It involved pushing for stricter rules.
Exactly. He knew the Buddha emphasized a middle way, not extreme asceticism for everyone. So Devadatta proposed 5 incredibly strict rules be made mandatory for all monks.
What were they?
Things like only ever living in the forest, never in monasteries, only eating food received directly in the alms bowl, never accepting invitations, wearing only robes made from patched up rags, always living at the foot of trees, never under a roof, and completely abstaining from all fish and meat.
That sounds intense, very austere, maybe appealing to some, but tough for everyone. What'd the Buddha say?
The Buddha's response was, well, typically balanced. He said, look, if individual monks want to follow these stricter practices, they are absolutely free to do so. He acknowledged their value for certain individuals.
Okay.
But he firmly refused to make them compulsory for the entire Sangha. He upheld the principle of individual choice and suitability.
So he didn't forbid them, but he didn't enforce them either. How did Devadatta use that?
He twisted it. He went around basically saying, see, the Buddha is lax. My way, these strict rules, this is the true path to liberation. If you really want to escape suffering, come with me. Follow my superior way.
And this manipulation actually worked on some people? He got followers this way.
Unfortunately, yes. He managed to convince about 500 monks. The text described them as mostly naive, newly ordained monks who were impressed by the appearance of extreme austerity. They didn't have the wisdom to see Devadatta's underlying ambition and pride.
500 monks, that's a significant number. And this led to an actual split, a schism.
Yes, a formal schism. Devadatta took these 500 monks and set up his own separate community. He started holding his own Upasatha, the fortnightly monastic observance day, conducting separate Sangha activities. It was a direct defiance, a real tearing of the community fabric.
A schism is incredibly serious. How did the Buddha react when he heard about this? Ananda must have told him right away.
Ananda did report it immediately. The Buddha's reaction wasn't anger, but deep concern. Especially for Devadatta himself. He saw Devadatta digging himself deeper and deeper into negative karma, heading for immense future suffering.
And didn't the Buddha speak some verses then about how evildoers suffer both now and later?
Yes, emphasizing the inescapable consequences. But his concern also extended to those 500 monks who'd been misled. So he decided to act. He dispatched his 2 chief disciples, Sariputta and Moggallana.
Sending the top 2, Sariputta known for wisdom, Moggallana for psychic powers. That shows how seriously he took it. Were they successful?
They were. They went to Devadatta's group, and through their skillful teaching, their wisdom, and yes, according to the texts, maybe even some demonstration of their own genuine spiritual power, they managed to win back all 500 monks.
All of them? Wow.
They basically reestablished them in the correct understanding of the Dharma. The texts even say Sariputta and Moggallana returned with the monks through the air, highlighting the success and maybe the miraculous nature of it.
A huge victory for the Sangha's unity, but a massive blow for Devadatta. And one of his remaining followers, Kokalika, didn't take it well at all, did he?
No, Kokalika was furious. He blamed Sariputta and Moggallana, of course, but he took his anger out on Devadatta. He apparently confronted Devadatta and struck him violently in the chest with his knee.
Ouch! And that had an immediate physical effect on Devadatta.
Instantly. Hot blood just spewed from Devadatta's mouth.
Yeah.
A really stark image showing the violence and turmoil even within his own small faction now.
Back with the main Sangha, the Buddha praised Sariputta for bringing the monks back, didn't he? He mentioned past lives.
He did. He pointed out that Sariputta had shown similar loyalty and skillful means in past lives too. And then, to really drive home the point about Devadatta's long-standing patterns, the Buddha recounted several Jataka tales.
Ah, the Jatakas, stories of his own past lives. What did they reveal about Devadatta's history?
They consistently showed Devadatta in various past births trying to imitate, harm, or betray the being who would become the Buddha. It painted a picture of ingrained rivalry, ungratefulness, and a tendency to always find fault. You mentioned specific ones like the Chulahasa, Mahasa, Kataka Jatakas, and others.
So this wasn't just a one-off breakdown in this life.
No, it was presented as a deep-seated karmic pattern. The Buddha even referenced another Jataka, the Akavanapatha, saying Devadatta had lost out on both worldly gain and virtue in past lives too, just like he was doing now, deprived on both fronts.
It really frames his current situation within a much larger karmic context. So after all this drama in Rajagaha, the Buddha heads back to Sabathi, to Jetavana monastery. What happens to Devadatta then?
Well, Devadatta falls seriously ill. He suffers for 9 long months.
9 months.
And as he nears the end, apparently he develops this intense desire to see the Buddha one last time. He begs his few remaining disciples to carry him to Jetavana.
But they must have been hesitant, surely, after everything he'd done.
Extremely hesitant. They reminded him, "You tried to kill him. You caused a schism." They refused at first. But then Devadatta says something quite interesting.
What did he say?
He basically acknowledged his own hostility. He said something like, "Look, I've harbored ill will towards the Blessed One my whole life, but he has never held any resentment towards me."
A moment of clarity, perhaps, recognizing the Buddha's compassion even towards him.
It seems like it. He kept pleading, acknowledging the Buddha's universal compassion, until finally his disciples agreed. They put him on a stretcher and started carrying him towards Savatthi, towards Jetavana.
So they're on their way. The monks at Jetavana must have told the Buddha Devadatta is coming. What was the Buddha's reaction?
The Buddha's response was very clear, very definite. He stated flatly, "Devadatta will not get to see me in this lifetime."
You wouldn't see him. Why not?
The texts mention a sort of established principle. Those who had caused a schism by advocating those 5 strict rules, they forfeited the chance to see the Buddha again in that life. It was like a consequence of that specific divisive action.
It's a symbolic barrier, then? So even as the disciples carried him closer and the monks kept reporting, he's getting nearer, the Buddha just kept saying,
"He will not be seen by me," unwavering. And then, as they finally arrived near Jetavana, they stopped by the monastery pond. The carriers wanted to bathe, maybe let Devadatta rest.
and this is where it happens, the final dramatic end.
This is it. Devadatta tries to get up from the stretcher, maybe to reach the water, and he puts his feet down on the ground. And in that instant,
Yes.
the earth literally opens up beneath him. It just swallows him, starting from his feet, pulling him down.
Swallowed by the earth. Incredible. Visceral. Did he say anything? His final words.
As he was sinking, up to his chin apparently, he managed one last utterance. He declared, "I go for refuge to the Buddha," acknowledging the Buddha's supreme qualities right at the very end.
Wow. Even then. And the texts add another layer, suggesting the Buddha knew this would happen, that ordaining him, despite everything, was part of a longer plan.
Yeah, it's a profound point. The commentary suggests the Buddha foresaw that even by being a monk, however badly he behaved, Devadatta set causes for eventual liberation far in the future as a Pacceka Buddha named Ahisara. It puts a different perspective on it, the very long view of karma.
That's quite something. But his immediate destination wasn't liberation, was it?
No, his immediate rebirth was in the Avici Hell, the lowest, most suffering-filled hell realm, described as a place of unimaginable torment.
And the descriptions are graphic.
Very graphic. Constant, intense suffering is a direct result of his actions against a fully enlightened Buddha. Impalement on fiery iron stakes, immense physical size corresponding to the suffering. It's depicted as truly horrific.
So after this extraordinary end, the monks obviously talk about it. What more did the Buddha say? Did he connect it to past lives again?
He did. When the monks discussed how Devadatta was swallowed by the earth, the Buddha confirmed this wasn't the first time. He cited more Jatakas, the Hatharaja, Kantavadi, Chaladamapala Jatakas, where Devadatta, in past lives, had suffered the exact same fate for similar acts of ingratitude or cruelty.
Reinforcing that karmic link across lifetimes. And what about the public? How did people react to the news of Devadatta's death?
By and large, the people rejoiced. There was widespread relief, even celebration.
Really? Celebrating someone's death?
The Buddha acknowledged this wasn't unusual. He cited another Jataka, the Pingala Jataka, saying that throughout history, people have often rejoiced at the downfall of cruel and wicked figures. It was seen as a relief from their negative influence.
Okay. And the monks, always curious, asked about his rebirth, which we know is Avici. They asked if the suffering there was like the suffering he had in his final illness.
Yes, they drew that parallel. And the Buddha affirmed it. He stated very clearly that anyone living heedlessly, monk or layperson, engaging in evil, suffers both in this life through remorse, illness, loss of reputation, and even more intensely in the next life due to the weight of their karma.
He concluded with a verse about that.
Yes, a powerful verse summarizing how the evildoer burns in this life with regret and burns even more fiercely in the next due to their bad deeds.
And after this whole discourse, many people were deeply affected.
Profoundly. The teaching led to many attaining stream entry or other stages of enlightenment. It was considered highly beneficial for the large crowd present. And the text simply ends the section. The story of Devadatta.
So, just to quickly recap our deep dive, We've followed Devadatta's entire arc, from his privileged start and ordination alongside future saints,
Mhm.
to the rise of his ambition, that intense rivalry with the Buddha, his failed, treacherous plots,
Right. The assassination attempts, the
yeah,
elephant.
the damaging schism he caused in the Sangha, and then that incredibly dramatic, frankly terrifying end swallowed by the earth.
It's quite a journey.
Yeah.
And for you listening, this story, it's just such a potent illustration of where unchecked ambition and corrosive rivalry can lead. We had those real aha moments, like Anuruddha's sheltered
Well,
upbringing.
and no cake.
Exactly. It shows how our background shapes us. And then the stark descriptions of Devadatta's actions and their unavoidable severe consequences.
And I think the narrative really balances the overview with those unforgettable details, the golden dish, Nalagiri charging, the earth opening up. Those images stick with you.
They really do. So this deep dive into Devadatta's story, it ultimately leaves us with a question for your own reflection. What are the maybe more subtle ways that ambition, that rivalry, can creep into our own lives or into society and potentially lead to really unforeseen, really damaging outcomes?
Yeah, something to think about. The nature of leadership, the importance of humility, and just the sheer weight of consequence that follows our actions. All themes brought powerfully to life in this story.